Chapter 1. A stormy start. The night sky glowed a deep purple. Shadows of trees swayed as the winds howled through Zhanjiang, a coastal town where fishermen whispered stories of storms carrying secrets to the sea. Thunder growled in the distance, rumbling like a sleeping giant waking up. Then, crack! Lightning split the sky, lighting up the worn wooden walls of a small one-room house. Inside, a baby's cry filled the air. It wasn't just any night. It was the night Liang Wenfeng was born. Rain hammered down on the roof as if nature itself had come to greet him. His mother cradled him close, her face tired but glowing with hope. She brushed her fingers gently over his tiny forehead. "You'll be special," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the storm's roar. His father stood nearby, a man with calloused hands and a soft gaze, watching his son with pride. The room was small, the walls thin, but their dreams for him were large. In their hearts they believed someday their son would do something extraordinary. Liang's earliest memories were filled with warmth, even in their modest home. His days were spent helping his mother peel vegetables, following his father to the market, and sitting cross-legged on the floor as they built tiny wooden boats together. But there was one thing that fascinated him above all else: the radio. It sat on a wooden shelf, crackling to life with news, music, and voices from faraway places. Liang would sit cross-legged in front of it for hours, as if the radio was a window into another world. How does it work? He often wondered, his mind already full of questions no one could answer. Then came the night that changed everything. The old radio, his trusted companion, suddenly crackled and died. The voice faded, replaced by a wall of static. Liang frowned, twisting the knobs, but the silence remained. "It's broken, son," his father said, shaking his head with a sigh, but Liang's eyes sparkled with determination. "I can fix it," he declared, jumping to his feet. His tiny hands gripped a screwdriver as if it were a sword. "Careful," his father warned, but Liang was already unscrewing the back panel. Wires tangled like a jungle inside the radio. To anyone else, it would look like a confusing mess, but to Liang, it was a puzzle waiting to be solved. For hours, he poked and prodded, trial and error guiding him. The storm outside raged on, the wind whistling through the cracks in the windows. Then, bzzzt, the radio hummed to life. A triumphant melody filled the room. Liang's face lit up with pride. "You really did it, Wenfeng," his father said, laughing in disbelief. "How?" Liang shrugged, grinning from ear to ear. "I just tried." That night, as the wind gently rocked the trees outside, Liang lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. The sound of rain tapped softly against the roof, but his mind was far away, lost in thoughts of what could be. "I don't want to just fix things," he thought. "I want to create them." Life in Zhanjiang, however, was not easy. His family often struggled with money. His mother took in sewing jobs from neighbors, stitching clothes late into the night, while his father worked long shifts at the factory. Yet, despite the hardships, they always found time to sit with Liang and talk about his dreams. One night, as she brushed his hair before bed, his mother whispered, "When I was your age, we didn't even have a school nearby. But you have opportunities. You can be anything." Liang held those words close to his heart. At dinner one evening, he overheard his parents whispering about school fees. "Maybe we can borrow from Uncle Ju," his mother suggested. His father shook his head. "No more loans. Wenfeng will have to help when he's older. Liang sat quietly, his chopsticks frozen mid-air. He didn't want to be a burden. He wanted to help them, not hold them back. The thought planted a seed of responsibility deep inside him, a seed that would grow and guide his decisions for years to come. At school, Liang's curiosity was both a gift and a challenge. His teachers called him the curious one, and his classmates often teased him for always asking questions. But he didn't care. While they played outside, he stayed behind, sketching diagrams of machines and reading about inventors like Thomas Edison and Nikola Tesla. The library became his second home, a place where his imagination had no limits. One afternoon, as he walked home with an armful of books, the skies darkened. Thunder rumbled overhead and raindrops began to fall, turning into a downpour within seconds. He ran as fast as he could, clutching the books to his chest. Lightning flashed, illuminating the narrow streets. Suddenly, slip! He lost his footing and crashed to the ground. His books tumbled into the mud, their pages stained and soaked. Liang sat there, breathless, rain mixing with the tears streaming down his cheeks. For a moment, all he could feel was defeat. But then, something remarkable happened. A thought flickered in his mind, like a spark of lightning. The rain will pass. Storms always do. He wiped his eyes, picked up the muddy books, and kept walking. By the time he reached home, he was drenched, but his heart felt stronger. His mother met him at the door, drying him off with a warm towel and bringing him a bowl of soup. "You're quiet tonight," she said softly, sitting beside him. "What's on your mind?" Liang stared into the bowl, the steam rising like a comforting fog. Then he looked up and said, "I'm going to make things better. For us." His mother smiled, her eyes shining with pride. "I know you will," she whispered, kissing his forehead. That night, as Liang sat by the window, watching the raindrops race each other down the glass, something shifted inside him. The storm outside had passed, leaving the air fresh and full of possibilities. And just like that, a seed of ambition began to bloom. For Liang Wenfeng, this was only the beginning. Chapter 2. Curiosity Unleashed. The sun burned brightly over Zhanjiang that morning, casting golden light through the windows of the small house. Birds chirped outside, and the smell of steamed rice filled the air. But Liang Wenfeng wasn't paying attention to any of that. His eyes were fixed on the family's old television set, which had been sitting in the corner, quietly gathering dust. The TV was big, bulky, and outdated, but to Liang, it was a world waiting to be explored. He circled it like a predator, gripping a small screwdriver in one hand. His heart raced. Today was the day. He was going to figure out how it worked, or at least that was the plan. His mother's voice called from the kitchen. "Wenfeng, have you finished your homework?" "Yes, Mama," he shouted back, though the math book on the table remained untouched. His focus was elsewhere. Carefully, Liang unscrewed the back panel of the television. The cover slid off with a soft clunk, revealing a maze of wires, circuit boards, and tiny metal parts. His breath hitched with excitement. "What are you hiding in here?" he whispered. He touched a bundle of red and green wires, tracing them with his fingers. Where did they go? What did they do? His mind buzzed with questions. He imagined sparks of electricity flowing through the circuits like rivers of light. The more he saw, the more he wanted to know. For hours he poked and prodded, unscrewing more panels and inspecting every component. He found himself lost in the details. Each tiny part was a piece of a larger puzzle. But then, disaster struck. Crack! A loud pop echoed through the room. Liang jumped back, his heart pounding. The smell of burning plastic filled the air. Smoke curled from the television and the screen went black. "No, no, no!" he cried, frantically trying to fix it. He twisted wires and pressed buttons, but it was too late. The TV was dead. Just then his mother walked in, wiping her hands on a kitchen towel. She froze when she saw the scene, the open TV, the mess of wires, and her son sitting on the floor with a guilty expression. Her eyes widened. "Wenfeng, what did you do?" I was just looking," he stammered, tears welling up in his eyes. "I wanted to see how it worked." His mother sighed deeply and sat down beside him. "I know you're curious, but this was our only television. Your father saved for months to buy it." Her voice was soft, but her words felt heavy. Liang lowered his head, ashamed. That evening, when his father came home from the factory, Liang braced himself for a scolding. Instead, his father sat next to him on the edge of the bed. "Did you learn anything?" he asked quietly. Liang nodded slowly. "I learned that I need to be more careful." His father chuckled. "That's a good start, but don't stop being curious. Curiosity is a gift. Just make sure you don't break everything we own." He ruffled Liang's hair, and for the first time that day, Liang smiled. The next morning, Liang woke up with renewed determination. He couldn't let one mistake stop him. He needed to understand electronics better, really understand them. If he could learn the basics, he wouldn't have to guess next time. At school, Liang found a book about simple circuits in the library. It wasn't easy to read and some of the words confused him, but he didn't give up. Each evening, after finishing his homework, he studied the book by candlelight. Slowly, he began to understand how electricity flowed, how resistors worked, and how wires connected to create a functioning device. But studying wasn't enough. Liang needed to build something. He remembered seeing an old broken radio in the storage room. It hadn't worked in years, but maybe, just maybe, he could bring it back to life. He rushed home, dug through boxes, and found the radio buried beneath a pile of old clothes. It was covered in dust and the volume knob was missing, but Liang's eyes sparkled with excitement. "You're my next experiment," he whispered. Over the next week, he worked tirelessly. His fingers carefully twisted wires, replaced resistors, and cleaned corroded components. There were moments of frustration, times when nothing seemed to work and he felt like giving up. But then, he remembered his father's words. "Don't stop being curious." On the 7th night, Liang connected the final wire and held his breath. He turned the dial, hoping for the best. At first there was only static. His heart sank. But then, music. Soft and sweet, it drifted from the speakers like magic. Liang's mouth fell open in shock and tears filled his eyes. He had done it. He had taken something broken and made it work again. He ran to the kitchen, shouting, "Mama! Papa! Come listen!" His parents hurried in, their faces a mix of surprise and pride. His mother covered her mouth, tears glistening in her eyes. "Wenfeng, you fixed it?" He nodded, beaming. "Yes, I did it!" His father clapped him on the back. "I knew you could." That night, as the family sat together listening to music on the radio, Liang felt a warmth in his chest. This was more than just fixing a device. It was the beginning of something bigger, He realized that his curiosity wasn't a problem. It was a tool, and if he used it wisely, it could lead him to amazing places. Before bed, he wrote in his notebook, "One day, I'll build something that changes the world." He didn't know what it would be yet, but deep down, he believed it was possible. The sparks of ambition had been lit, and there was no turning back. As the moon cast its soft glow over the town, Liang Wenfeng dreamed of machines, wires, and endless possibilities. He didn't just want to fix things anymore. He wanted to create things that could make life better for everyone. Chapter 3. The Lesson of Failure. The sun blazed through the classroom windows as 14-year-old Liang Wenfeng adjusted his glasses, his fingers nervously tapping the table. The science competition was about to start. Rows of students sat with their projects displayed neatly before them. Posters, models, and blinking gadgets filled the room with color and noise. Liang's heart thumped loudly in his chest. His project stood proudly on the table. A small motor-powered fan that could spin faster or slower based on temperature changes. He had worked on it for weeks, sometimes skipping meals just to test it again and again. Today it was supposed to be perfect. He believed it would impress the judges. He believed until doubt crept in. "Wenfeng, are you ready?" asked Ming, his best friend and classmate, who had a chemistry project next to him. Liang nodded, but the truth was he wasn't sure. His mind replayed the long nights of tinkering. What if the wires weren't connected properly? What if the fan didn't spin? His hands trembled slightly as he adjusted the switch one more time. The judges arrived, their eyes scanning the room like hawks searching for prey. 3 of them, an older man in a gray suit, a middle-aged woman with a clipboard, and a young engineer with a kind smile, stopped in front of Liang's table. "Good afternoon," said the woman. "Show us your project." Liang's throat felt dry. He cleared it and forced himself to speak. "This is a temperature-controlled fan. It spins faster when it's warm and slower when it's cold. The goal is to save energy and make cooling systems more efficient." The older judge nodded. "Impressive idea. Let's see it in action." Liang's fingers fumbled as he switched on the fan. It hummed softly, the blades turning slowly. He lit a small candle beneath the sensor, just like he had practiced dozens of times. The heat should trigger the motor to speed up. Any second now. The judges waited. Liang waited. But nothing happened. His palms grew sweaty. He adjusted the wires, checked the connections, and tried again. The fan remained sluggish, refusing to spin faster. His heart pounded and panic clawed at his chest. It worked at home," he stammered. "I don't know what's wrong." The older judge sighed, scribbling notes on a piece of paper. The middle-aged woman shook her head slightly. The young engineer bent down to inspect the wires but said nothing. Liang felt their silent judgment like a heavy weight pressing on him. Behind him, a group of students began to whisper. "He's messing up," one of them snickered. Another chuckled. "I thought he was supposed to be smart." Liang's face burned with shame. His vision blurred as tears threatened to fall, but he bit his lip and held them back. He couldn't cry. Not here. After what felt like an eternity, the judges moved on to the next table. The young engineer gave him a small, encouraging smile before leaving, but it wasn't enough to lift the crushing disappointment in Liang's heart. That evening, Liang walked home alone. The sun had set, and the streets were quiet, except for the distant sound of bicycles and street vendors packing up for the night. His backpack felt heavier than usual, and his mind replayed the scene over and over. His failure, the whispers, the judge's disappointed looks. When he reached home, his mother greeted him with a warm smile. "How was the competition, Wenfeng?" she asked as she stirred a pot of soup. Liang didn't answer. He dropped his bag on the floor and went straight to his room, shutting the door behind him. He lay on the bed, staring at the ceiling. The tears he had held back earlier finally spilled down his cheeks. "I'm not good enough," he thought. "Maybe I'll never be good enough." A soft knock on the door interrupted his thoughts. It was Mr. Zhao, his science teacher, who had come by after hearing about the competition. "May I come in?" the teacher asked gently. Liang wiped his eyes and nodded. Mr. Zhao sat on the edge of the bed, looking around the small room. His gaze landed on the notebooks filled with sketches and ideas scattered across the desk. "I heard about what happened today," Mr. Zhao said. Liang sniffled. "I failed. Everyone saw it. I don't want to go back to school." Mr. Zhao smiled faintly. "Do you know what makes a good scientist, Liang?" Liang shook his head, his eyes still wet. "Being smart, I guess. Knowing how to make things work." "No," Mr. Zhao said softly. "It's failure. Every great inventor, every brilliant scientist has failed, sometimes over and over again." Liang looked up, confused. "But I was embarrassed. They laughed at me." Mr. Zhao sighed. "I know it hurts, but failure isn't the end, Wenfeng. It's the beginning. When you fail, you learn. When you learn, you grow. Thomas Edison failed thousands of times before inventing the light bulb. If he had given up, the world would be a darker place, don't you think?" Liang's breath hitched. "But I feel like I disappointed everyone." Mr. Zhao placed a hand on his shoulder. "You didn't disappoint me, and I know your parents are proud of you. What matters now is what you do next. Will you give up, or will you try again?" Liang didn't answer right away. His mind was spinning with thoughts, his shame, his dreams, his teacher's words. Finally, he whispered, "I want to try again." Mr. Zhao smiled. "Good. Then tomorrow, we'll figure out what went wrong with the fan. We'll fix it together." The next day, Liang arrived at school with a notebook in hand and determination in his heart. He met Mr. Zhao in the science lab, where they took the fan apart piece by piece. After hours of testing, Liang found the problem, a loose wire that had disconnected during the competition. He fixed it, and this time when he tested the fan, it worked perfectly. The blade spun faster as the candle's heat touched the sensor. Liang laughed, a sound of pure relief and joy. Mr. Zhao clapped his hands. "See? Failure isn't final." As Liang packed up his project, he felt something shift inside him. The sting of failure had faded, replaced by a spark of resilience. He realized that mistakes didn't define him. How he responded to them did. Before leaving the lab, he wrote in his notebook, "Failure teaches me more than success ever could. Next time, I won't be afraid." Chapter 4. Winds of Change. Liang Wenfeng sat in the back row of the classroom, tapping his pencil against the desk. Outside, the wind carried the scent of freshly cut grass through the open windows, but he barely noticed it. His mind was elsewhere. It was the first day of a new class, computer science, He wasn't sure what to expect. Most students had signed up because it was an elective, but something about it felt different to Liang. He had always been curious about machines, but this was a step into the unknown. The teacher, Mr. Chang, walked in carrying a stack of books and an air of authority. He wrote 3 simple words on the chalkboard. What is an algorithm? Today, we begin with the basics, Mr. Chung said, his voice calm but firm. An algorithm is a set of instructions, a step-by-step guide to solve a problem, like a recipe for cooking or directions on a map. He looked around the room. But algorithms are more than that. They are the heart of computer programming. Liang sat up straighter. Something about those words grabbed his attention. He had never thought of problem-solving like that. A recipe for a machine? Could he learn to control what machines do with just instructions? The thought excited him. Mr. Chung continued, showing examples on the board. Liang scribbled down notes as fast as he could. Sorting numbers, searching for patterns, these weren't just abstract ideas. They were puzzles, and Liang loved puzzles. By the end of this semester, Mr. Chung said, you'll be writing your own programs. You'll create algorithms that can solve problems faster than any human mind. Liang's heart raced. He couldn't wait to begin. That evening, he went home and opened an old laptop his uncle had given him. It was slow, with missing keys and a cracked screen, but it didn't matter. It was a window into a new world. He searched online for beginner coding tutorials and found one about writing simple algorithms in Python. The first exercise was a program to calculate the average of 3 numbers. It seemed easy at first, but when Liang tried to run the program, it failed. An error message flashed on the screen, mocking him. "Why won't you work?" he muttered, running his fingers through his hair. He reread the code, line by line. He adjusted variables, rewrote conditions, and tested it again. Still, the error remained. Frustration gnawed at him. His mother knocked on the door, bringing in a plate of steamed dumplings. "Wenfeng, take a break." "I can't," he replied without looking up. "I need to fix this." She sighed softly, placing the plate on the desk. "Don't push yourself too hard. You'll figure it out." But Liang didn't want to rest. He couldn't. The problem consumed him. Hours passed. The dim glow of the laptop screen was the only light in the room. The wind outside howled, shaking the window. Liang ignored it. He tried again, and again. Finally, just as the clock struck midnight, the program worked. "Yes," he whispered, punching the air in triumph. The numbers on the screen weren't just outputs. They were proof of his persistence. He leaned back, exhausted but happy. The sleepless night was worth it. His first success fueled him, like a gust of wind pushing a sailboat forward. Over the next few months, Liang's obsession with coding grew. He stayed late after school, asking Mr. Chung questions about algorithms, data structures, and logic. Mr. Chung smiled whenever Liang walked into the room. "Ah, my star pupil," he would joke. "You never get tired of learning, do you?" "I can't help it," Liang replied, grinning. "I want to understand everything." He learned how to write programs that could sort large lists of names, search for information within seconds, and even predict simple outcomes based on patterns. With each new project, he felt like he was peeling back the layers of a mysterious machine. The deeper he went, the more fascinating it became. But with ambition came sacrifice. He often skipped meals, missed family gatherings, and stayed up until dawn, eyes red from staring at the screen. His mother worried. "You're not eating properly," she said one evening, placing a bowl of rice on his desk. "I'm fine, Mama," he replied, barely glancing away from the code. "You need rest, too," she added gently. "Even machines overheat if you run them too long." Liang paused, her words sinking in. He knew she was right, but the drive inside him was hard to ignore. "I'll sleep after I finish this," he promised, but deep down, he knew the finish line kept moving. One day, Mr. Chung announced a class competition. "I want you to create an algorithm that can solve a practical problem," he said. "The winning project will be presented at the school's annual science fair." Liang's pulse quickened. This was his chance. He thought about problems in everyday life and remembered how long it took his parents to compare prices at the market. What if he could create a program that did it instantly? An algorithm that could find the best price for any product? He started sketching ideas in his notebook. Over the next few weeks, Liang worked tirelessly on the project. He wrote code, tested it, and debugged it until his eyes burned. There were moments of doubt, times when the program failed and he felt like giving up. But each failure reminded him of Mr. Zhao's lesson. Failure isn't the end. It's the beginning. On the day of the competition, Liang stood nervously in front of the judges. His classmates watched from the audience, whispering among themselves. Liang's hands were clammy, but he took a deep breath. "This is a price comparison algorithm," he explained. "It searches through a database of products and finds the cheapest option in seconds. It could help families save time and money." He demonstrated the program, entering different product names. The results appeared instantly on the screen. The judges nodded, impressed. When the results were announced, Liang's name was called. He had won first place. The applause was deafening, but all he could hear was the pounding of his heart. Tears blurred his vision as he accepted the certificate. He had worked for this moment, and now it was real. That night, as he lay in bed, Liang stared at the ceiling, unable to sleep. His mind raced with new ideas, new possibilities. This wasn't just a school project. It was a glimpse of what he could achieve if he kept going. The wind outside was calm now, but inside him it roared like a storm, pushing him forward. He whispered to himself, "I won't stop. One day, I'll create something that matters." And with that promise, Liang Wenfeng closed his eyes, dreaming of the future that awaited him. Chapter 5. The College Dream. Liang Wenfeng stood at the entrance of Zhejiang University, his suitcase by his side and his heart pounding with excitement. The grand campus stretched before him, modern buildings, tree-lined walkways, and groups of students rushing to class. The autumn breeze carried the scent of fallen leaves. For a moment, he couldn't believe he was really here. He had dreamed of this moment for years. His acceptance letter had arrived 2 months earlier, but he had read it over and over, unable to believe it was real. Now, standing here in person, he knew it wasn't a dream. Liang pulled his suitcase across the cobblestone path toward his dormitory. He smiled at other students, though most of them barely noticed him. Inside the room, he unpacked carefully. His old laptop, a notebook filled with ideas, and a single framed photo of his family. He placed it on the desk and sat down, taking a deep breath. "This is the start of something new," he whispered. I won't waste this chance. But his excitement was quickly followed by reality. College life wasn't going to be easy. His family had scraped together just enough money for his tuition, but there was little left for food, books, or other expenses. He couldn't ask for more. His parents had already sacrificed so much. I have to find a way to support myself, he thought. The first few weeks were harder than Liang had expected. Classes moved fast. Professors spoke quickly and assignments piled up. He spent long hours in the library, reading textbooks and taking notes until his fingers ached. But the more he learned, the hungrier he became for knowledge. He attended lectures on algorithms, data structures, and artificial intelligence. His professors spoke about concepts that once seemed like distant dreams. Now, they were within reach. But as the weeks passed, another problem grew. Money. His savings were disappearing fast. One evening, as he counted the last of his cash, a knot formed in his stomach. This won't last, he murmured. Liang knew he had to act quickly. The next day, he went to the university's job board and scanned the list of part-time jobs. Cafeteria worker, library assistant, delivery driver. None of them paid much, but he couldn't afford to be picky. He applied for a job as a janitor in the university building. The pay was low, but the hours were flexible. He could clean classrooms early in the morning before classes started and study at night. When he got the job, relief washed over him, but it was short-lived. Balancing work and studies would be another challenge. The alarm clock buzzed at 5 a.m., pulling Liang from his dreams. He rubbed his eyes and sat up, his body sore from the previous day's work. He quickly put on his uniform, grabbed a mop, and headed to the campus. The hallways were empty, the sound of his footsteps echoing off the walls. Liang cleaned the floors, wiped desks, and emptied trash cans, his thoughts drifting to the lectures he had that day. When his shift ended, he rushed to class, barely having time to eat breakfast. Fatigue followed him like a shadow. By mid-afternoon, his eyelids felt heavy. During one lecture, he nearly nodded off, but forced himself to stay awake. I can't give up, he thought. I'm here for a reason. In the evenings, Liang took on another job, tutoring first-year students in math and computer science. The extra income helped, but it left him with little time to relax. Sometimes he skipped meals to finish assignments. Other times he stayed up until dawn, his eyes burning as he stared at the screen, debugging code. One night, after finishing a particularly difficult assignment, he leaned back in his chair and looked at the photo of his family on the desk. His mother's warm smile and his father's proud gaze seemed to whisper encouragement. I'm doing this for you, he said softly. I won't let you down. Despite the hardships, Liang found moments of joy. His professors praised his dedication, and his classmates began to notice his talent. He made friends with other students who shared his love for technology. Together, they worked on projects late into the night, fueled by instant noodles and shared dreams of innovation. One evening, a professor named Dr. Yu stopped Liang after class. I've noticed your work, she said, handing him a paper with notes scribbled in red ink. Your understanding of algorithms is impressive. Have you thought about joining the research lab? Liang's eyes widened. Me? In the lab? Yes, she replied. We're working on AI models for real-world applications. It's challenging, but I think you're ready. Liang's heart raced. This was the opportunity he had been waiting for. He thanked Dr. Yu and walked home with a spring in his step, his mind already spinning with ideas. The next day, he joined the lab. It was a world of endless possibilities. He worked alongside graduate students, building and testing algorithms that could predict outcomes, solve complex problems, and improve machine learning systems. Every success felt like a step closer to his dreams. But not everything went smoothly. One night, while debugging a program for the lab, Liang hit a wall. No matter how many times he ran the code, errors kept appearing. Frustration boiled inside him. He slammed the keyboard, burying his face in his hands. "What am I doing wrong?" he whispered. Exhaustion blurred his thoughts, and for the first time in months, he felt like quitting. A soft knock on the door broke the silence. It was Ming, his old friend from high school. He placed a cup of hot tea on the desk and sat down. "You've been working too hard," Ming said. "When was the last time you slept?" Liang shook his head. "I can't stop now. I have to make this work." "You don't have to do everything alone," Ming replied. "Take a break, rest your mind. You'll find the answer." Reluctantly, Liang agreed. He lay down on the bed, intending to rest for only a few minutes, but his body gave in. He slept for 10 hours straight. When he woke up, sunlight streamed through the window and his mind felt clearer. He returned to the code, and within an hour he found the problem. The program worked perfectly. By the end of his first year, Liang had earned scholarships for his academic performance and recognition from his professors. His hard work was paying off, but he knew this was just the beginning. He stood on the balcony of his dormitory one evening, watching the city lights twinkle in the distance. "I've made it this far," he said to himself. "I can go further." The winds of change were blowing, but this time Liang was ready to face them head-on. He had conquered hunger, exhaustion, and doubt. With each step forward, his dream of building something great came closer to reality. As the stars sparkled above, he whispered, "The best is yet to come." Chapter 6. The Genius Lab. The sound of humming machines filled the room, like music to Liang Wenfeng's ears. Inside Zhejiang University's Advanced Electronics Lab, sparks flew as wires connected, circuits buzzed, and keyboards clicked in rapid succession. This was where the magic happened, the place where ideas turned into inventions. And now, Liang was leading a project that could change everything. He stood at the center of the lab, surrounded by computers, sensors, and a team of students who looked to him for direction. Their project was ambitious, an AI-powered drone that could navigate difficult terrain without human control. If it worked, it could be used for search and rescue missions in disaster zones. Liang clapped his hands to get the team's attention. "Okay, let's run the test one more time. Check the sensors, make sure the cameras are calibrated, and reset the navigation code." The team moved quickly, following his instructions. Liang's eyes scanned the setup, checking every detail. He felt the familiar thrill of anticipation, the same feeling he had when debugging a difficult program. Success was within reach, but he knew how easily things could go wrong. The drone lifted off the ground, its propellers whirring softly. It hovered for a moment, then zipped across the lab, avoiding obstacles placed in its path. The team held their breath as it successfully navigated past a stack of books and a row of chairs. But then, disaster struck. The drone's sensor failed to detect a low table. It crashed with a loud thud, pieces scattering across the floor. The team groaned, and Liang felt his heart sink. "Not again," muttered Zhang, one of the students. "We've tested this a dozen times. It's hopeless." Liang took a deep breath, forcing himself to stay calm. "It's not hopeless. We're close. Let's check the code and see what went wrong." The team gathered around a computer, analyzing the data. Zhang crossed his arms and sighed loudly. Maybe the problem isn't the code. Maybe it's the leader. Liang's stomach tightened, but he didn't respond. He couldn't afford to let emotions cloud his judgment. Instead, he focused on finding the bug in the system. After an hour of testing, he pinpointed the issue: a delay in the sensor's response time. He looked up and smiled faintly. "We found the problem. Let's fix it and try again tomorrow." The next day, they ran the test again. This time, the drone navigated smoothly, weaving around obstacles and landing perfectly on its designated spot. The team cheered, and relief washed over Liang like a cool breeze on a hot day. Dr. Yu, the professor supervising the project, entered the lab just as the team celebrated. She watched the replay of the test with a nod of approval. "Excellent work, Liang. The dean wants to see your progress next week. If everything goes well, this could be presented at the National Tech Conference." Liang's eyes widened. "The National Conference?" "Yes," Dr. Yu said, smiling. "It's a big opportunity." Excitement bubbled inside him, but he knew this was only the beginning. They still had work to do. As news of their success spread, Liang began to notice changes. His name was mentioned more often in classrooms, and younger students approached him for advice. But not everyone was happy for him. The jealousy among some classmates was hard to miss. During lunch one afternoon, Zhang sat across from him in the cafeteria, stirring his bowl of rice with a scowl. "You're lucky, you know," he said, not bothering to hide the bitterness in his voice. "Lucky?" Liang frowned. "We worked hard for this." "You mean you worked hard?" Zhang said. "Everyone thinks you're some kind of genius, but we're all working just as hard." Liang didn't know what to say. He had always believed teamwork was about supporting each other, but Zhang's words felt like a punch to the gut. Later that week, the tension grew worse. Liang found that some team members were skipping meetings or not following instructions properly. One day, during a critical test, a miscommunication caused the drone to crash again. "Why didn't you check the battery levels?" Liang asked, frustrated. "I thought someone else would do it," Zhang replied, shrugging. Liang clenched his fists. "We can't afford mistakes like this. We're presenting in 2 days." "Maybe you should handle everything yourself," Zhang said coldly. Liang walked away, his mind spinning. He felt trapped between his desire to succeed and the growing hostility around him. That night, as he sat alone in the lab, he stared at the drone, its damaged propellers hanging like broken wings. He thought about giving up. Maybe Zhang was right. Maybe he wasn't fit to lead. But then he remembered the sleepless nights, the sacrifices, and the reason he had started this project. He wasn't just doing it for himself. He was doing it to create something meaningful. The next morning, Liang gathered the team. His voice was calm but firm. I know we've had problems. I know some of you are upset. But this isn't just about me. It's about what we can achieve together. We've come too far to let this fall apart now. The room was silent. Then slowly, one by one, the team members nodded. Even Zhang looked down, as if realizing the weight of his actions. I'm not perfect, Liang admitted. I need your help, but we need to trust each other. The atmosphere shifted. They worked late into the night, fixing errors, testing the drone, and making sure everything was ready for the presentation. The day of the presentation arrived. The auditorium was filled with professors, students, and industry professionals. Liang's heart raced as he stood at the podium explaining their project. He demonstrated how the drone could navigate obstacles and provide real-time data to rescuers. When the test began, the drone lifted off smoothly. It glided through the course, dodging obstacles and completing the mission flawlessly. Applause erupted as it landed. Dr. Yu approached him afterward, beaming with pride. You did it, Liang. But what meant more to him was when Zhang walked up and shook his hand. I'm sorry, Zhang said. I was wrong. You're a good leader. Liang smiled. We did this together. That night, as he lay in bed, Liang thought about the challenges they had faced. The jealousy, the failures, and the doubts had tested him. But he had learned that leadership wasn't about being perfect. It was about resilience, patience, and bringing people together. He closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the day lift from his shoulders. The lab had been his battlefield, but it had also been his greatest teacher. And with this victory, he knew one thing for sure. This was just the beginning. Chapter 7. Between Love and Logic. Liang Wenfeng sat in the campus library, surrounded by books and the soft hum of fluorescent lights. The smell of paper and ink filled the air as he scribbled equations into his notebook. It was late, almost midnight, but he didn't care. He was used to late nights. Between his research, classes, and part-time job, there was always something demanding his attention. But that night wasn't like the others. He wasn't alone. Across the table sat Yanyu, her hair falling gently over her face as she focused on her notes. Her fingers danced across her laptop keyboard, and her eyes sparkled with determination. She was studying environmental science, but tonight, she was helping Liang debug a program for his AI project. Try changing this line of code, she suggested, leaning closer to his screen. Liang typed quickly, following her advice. He hit enter and held his breath. The screen flickered, and the output was perfect. You did it, he said, grinning. We did it, she corrected, flashing him a warm smile. The tension in his chest melted, and for a moment, the world outside the library disappeared. Thank you, Liang whispered. His voice was soft, but the meaning was heavy. Yanyu had become more than a study partner. Over the past few months, they had spent countless hours together, sharing meals, solving problems, and laughing at their own mistakes. Somewhere along the way, Liang had fallen in love. The next weekend, Liang and Yanyu walked through the park near campus. The trees swayed gently in the spring breeze, their leaves casting dappled shadows on the path. Liang held a bag of roasted chestnuts, and Yanyu reached for one, her fingers brushing against his. "I never thought computer science could be romantic," she teased, popping a chestnut into her mouth. Liang laughed. "It's only romantic when you're involved." She blushed, and for a moment, they walked in comfortable silence. The sounds of children playing and birds chirping filled the air. Liang felt at peace, something he rarely experienced amid the chaos of school and work. But peace didn't last long. As the semester progressed, Liang's schedule became overwhelming. His AI research demanded more time, and the university lab often kept him working late into the night. His part-time tutoring job was also growing more intense, as his students struggled to prepare for final exams. Sleep became a luxury. Meals were rushed. His mind was constantly racing. At first, Yanyu was patient. She understood his ambition and supported him. But as weeks turned into months, cracks began to form. Dinner plans were canceled. Study dates were rescheduled. Text messages went unanswered. One evening, as Liang sat in the lab debugging another program, his phone buzzed on the desk. It was Yanyu. "Are you coming to dinner?" the message read. He hesitated, glancing at the lines of code on his screen. He had promised her they'd have dinner together, but the project was behind schedule. His professor expected results by the next morning. Just 5 more minutes, he thought. But 5 minutes turned into an hour. By the time he checked his phone again, Yanyu had sent a second message. "Never mind." Liang's heart sank. He knew he had let her down. Again. The next day, he found Yanyu sitting under a tree on campus, her arms crossed and her eyes distant. He sat down beside her, the weight of guilt pressing on his chest. "I'm sorry about last night," he said softly. She didn't look at him. "You've been saying that a lot lately." "I know," Liang admitted. "It's just... the project is important." "I understand that," she replied, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "But what about us? Are we important?" Liang opened his mouth to respond, but no words came out. He wanted to say yes, that she meant everything to him, but how could he prove it when he kept putting her second? The silence stretched between them, heavy and painful. Finally, Yanyu stood up. "I care about you, Wenfeng, but I can't keep waiting for someone who's always too busy." Liang watched her walk away, his heart breaking with every step. He wanted to chase after her, to explain that he was doing all of this for a better future. But something held him back. Fear, confusion, or maybe the weight of his own ambition. That night, Liang sat alone in his dorm room, staring at the photo of Yanyu on his phone. His mind replayed their last conversation over and over, like a broken record. The pain in her voice haunted him. For the first time in months, he couldn't focus on work. He closed his laptop, buried his face in his hands, and let the tears fall. He thought about everything he had sacrificed. Time with his family, sleep. And now, possibly, the woman he loved. Was it worth it? Could success really replace the emptiness he felt? The next morning, Liang went to the park where they had once walked together. The air was crisp, and the scent of blooming flowers lingered in the breeze. He sat on the same bench and stared at the spot where Yanyu had laughed, where her eyes had lit up at his jokes. He missed her. He missed the way she made him feel grounded, even when the world seemed chaotic. But he couldn't turn back time. He could only move forward. 2 days later, he knocked on Yanyu's door, his heart pounding. She opened it, her expression guarded. "I don't expect you to forgive me," Liang said quickly. "But I want you to know that I'm trying. I'm learning to balance my life better. And if you give me another chance, I'll prove it to you." Yanyu studied him for a moment, her gaze softening. "I'm not asking you to give up your dreams," she said. "I just want to be part of them." Liang nodded. "You already are." She stepped aside, letting him in. They sat on the couch, talking for hours. Liang explained the pressure he felt, the expectations he had placed on himself, and how much he regretted pushing her away. Yanyu listened, her hand resting gently on his. "I'm not perfect," he said, "but I'm willing to change." "That's all I needed to hear," she replied. From that day forward, Liang made an effort to balance his life. He created schedules, set boundaries, and made time for Yanyu. There were still challenges, but they faced them together. Slowly, the distance between them faded, replaced by something stronger: understanding, respect, and love. One evening, as they walked through the park again, Yanyu looked up at him and smiled. "You've changed," she said. "I had to," Liang replied, squeezing her hand, "because losing you wasn't an option." The wind rustled the leaves around them, but this time Liang felt grounded. He had learned that success wasn't measured by achievements alone. It was also about the people who stood by him, even when the road was rough. Chapter 8. Dreaming Bigger. The auditorium was filled with applause as Liang Wenfeng walked across the stage to receive his degree. The lights above him glowed softly, and the sound of clapping echoed off the walls. He shook hands with the dean, bowed respectfully, and looked out into the crowd. His parents were sitting in the front row, smiling proudly, with tears shining in his mother's eyes. Yanyu sat next to them, clapping louder than anyone else. "I did it," he thought, holding the diploma tightly. Graduating with honors had been his dream since he first set foot at Zhejiang University. Now, that dream had come true. Later that evening, at the graduation party, friends surrounded him, congratulating him and sharing memories of late-night study sessions and impossible deadlines. But even amid the laughter and celebration, Liang felt something tugging at his thoughts. An unanswered question about what came next. The answer arrived sooner than he expected. A few weeks after graduation, he received a job offer from a major tech firm in the city. The company was known for its cutting-edge work in AI and data analytics. The salary was good, the office modern and sleek, and the position prestigious. When Liang read the email, his heart raced with excitement. He imagined working on large projects, developing revolutionary AI systems, and leading teams of talented engineers. He couldn't wait to get started. On his first day, Liang walked into the towering glass building with high hopes. The lobby sparkled with polished floors and futuristic architecture. Workers in suits moved briskly, their shoes tapping softly against the marble. Everything felt new and promising. A friendly manager, Mr. Lin, greeted Liang and showed him around the office. His workspace was clean and well-equipped, with state-of-the-art computers and tools. Liang took a deep breath. This is where I'll make a difference. But things weren't what they seemed. At first, Liang tried to adapt. He followed instructions carefully, attended meetings, and worked on the tasks given to him. But the projects lacked creativity. Instead of building new systems, he was fixing bugs in existing ones. Instead of inventing new algorithms, he was writing reports. His ideas for improving efficiency were often ignored. "Just stick to the guidelines," Mr. Lin said one afternoon when Liang proposed a new approach to data sorting. "The higher-ups don't want risks. They want stability." Liang's shoulders tensed. He bit his lip, nodded politely, and returned to his desk. But inside, frustration boiled. His mind was filled with possibilities. Ways to innovate, ways to push AI technology further. But every suggestion seemed to hit a wall. Weeks turned into months, and Liang felt trapped in a routine that suffocated him. The office, once exciting, now felt like a prison. He spent his days staring at screens, working on tasks that didn't challenge him. The clock on the wall ticked slowly, and each passing hour felt heavier than the last. One evening, after a particularly dull day, Liang walked home under the flickering glow of streetlights. The city was alive with noise. Cars honking, people laughing, street vendors calling out to passers-by. But Liang barely noticed any of it. His mind was clouded with doubt. Is this it? He wondered. Is this what success feels like? He reached his apartment, tossed his bag onto the couch, and sank into a chair. Yanyu, who had just returned from her own job, noticed the exhaustion on his face. She sat next to him and gently touched his hand. "Wenfeng, what's wrong?" "I feel stuck," he admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I thought this job would be different. I thought I'd be building something new, but it's just the same thing every day." Yanyu listened carefully, her gaze steady and comforting. "Then maybe it's time to think bigger," she said softly. Her words hung in the air, like a spark waiting to ignite. Liang looked at her, and for the first time in weeks, hope flickered inside him. The next day, Liang arrived at work with a different mindset. He didn't see the office as a place to succeed anymore. It was a place holding him back. As the hours dragged on, he thought about the risks and rewards of leaving. He thought about the ideas that had been simmering in his mind for months, waiting to be developed. By lunchtime, his decision was clear. He walked into Mr. Lin's office and handed in his resignation letter. Mr. Lin raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure about this, Liang? You're on track for a promotion." Liang shook his head. "I don't want to spend the next 5 years doing the same thing. I need to create something of my own." Mr. Lin sighed. "It's a tough world out there. Starting your own company isn't easy." "I know," Liang said firmly, "but I'd rather fail trying than stay here and wonder what could have been." With no steady paycheck and no safety net, Liang's life changed overnight. The days that followed were filled with uncertainty. His apartment became his office. His savings dwindled as he poured money into research, equipment, and software. But for the first time in months, Liang felt alive. He worked late into the night, developing prototypes for AI applications that could solve real-world problems. One of his first ideas was a machine learning model that could help farmers predict crop failures based on weather patterns. He built the system piece by piece, testing it with real data and refining the algorithms. Yanyu became his biggest supporter, often bringing him meals when he forgot to eat. "You're building something amazing," she said, watching him code with laser focus. But not every day was filled with progress. There were setbacks, days when the code failed, when funding felt out of reach, and when doubt crept back into Liang's mind. He often asked himself, "Did I make a mistake?" One evening, as he reviewed yet another failed test, his phone buzzed. It was a message from an old classmate now working at a startup. "I heard you left your job," the message read. "We should talk. There's a potential investor interested in AI projects." Liang's heart raced. He called the classmate immediately, and within a week, he had his first meeting with an investor. The investor listened carefully as Liang explained his vision. "I'm not just building technology," Liang said passionately. "I'm building solutions." The investor smiled. "That's exactly what we're looking for." Weeks later, with the funding secured, Liang officially launched his own AI firm, an ambitious venture that focused on creating tools for industries ranging from agriculture to healthcare. The name of the company, DeepSeek. On the day the office opened, Liang stood in the middle of the small workspace, surrounded by new computers, whiteboards covered in notes, and a handful of dedicated employees. Yanyu stood by his side, her eyes shining with pride. "You did it," she said. "No," Liang replied, smiling. "We did it." The winds of change had carried him here, but it was just the beginning of a much bigger journey. He didn't know what challenges lay ahead, but one thing was certain. He was ready to face them. With a deep breath, Liang stepped forward, ready to dream even bigger. Chapter 9. High Flyers Gamble. Liang Wenfeng stared out of the small office window. Rain splashed against the glass, forming tiny rivers that trickled down, blurring the view of the busy street below. The air inside felt heavy. Desks were cluttered with coffee cups, papers, and computers that hummed quietly in the background. His co-founder, Chen Yi, was pacing back and forth, biting his nails. "We're running out of time," Chen said, his voice tight with anxiety. "If this next test doesn't work..." Liang knew how that sentence would end. If the test failed, they wouldn't be able to pay rent. Their investors were already growing impatient. High Flyer, the AI-driven trading startup they had founded just 6 months ago, was on the verge of collapse. Liang took a deep breath and leaned forward, staring at the lines of code on his screen. The program they had built was supposed to analyze stock market patterns and make fast, accurate trades, but so far it had been inconsistent. Some days, it worked perfectly. Other days, it made costly mistakes. They couldn't afford any more mistakes. "Let's run the test again," Liang said, keeping his voice calm. "We fixed the algorithm. This time, it will work." Chen nodded reluctantly and sat down at his desk. The room fell silent except for the soft tapping of keys. The test began, and both men watched the screen closely. The numbers blinked rapidly as the program simulated trades in real time. Liang's heart pounded. "Come on, don't fail us now." 2 hours later, the results appeared. Liang scanned the data, his eyes darting back and forth. Profits were low, but there was no major loss. It wasn't perfect, but it wasn't a disaster either. Still, Chen wasn't satisfied. "This won't convince investors," he muttered, running a hand through his hair. "We need something bigger." Liang knew Chen was right. Investors didn't want small wins. They wanted proof that High Flyer could make real money, fast and reliably. Without that, the company wouldn't survive another month. That night, Liang stayed in the office long after everyone else had gone home. The rain continued to pour outside, and the ticking of the wall clock was the only sound breaking the silence. He leaned back in his chair, exhausted, and closed his eyes. Doubts swirled in his mind. Did I make a mistake starting this company? Should I have stayed at my corporate job, where things were safer? But deep down, he knew the answer. He had left that life behind because he wanted to create something meaningful. Something that would change the way people thought about AI and trading. Giving up wasn't an option. He opened his eyes and looked at the code again. He examined each line carefully, searching for hidden errors. After hours of work, he noticed something, a tiny flaw in the algorithm that calculated risk. It wasn't obvious, but it explained why their results had been inconsistent. His fingers flew across the keyboard as he rewrote the section of code. When he finished, the first rays of dawn were peeking through the window. Liang stretched his arms and smiled faintly. He felt a spark of hope. The next day, he called an emergency team meeting. Chen, along with the developers and analysts, gathered around the main computer. Liang explained the bug he had found and how he had fixed it. If we're right, this version of the algorithm will be more accurate, he said confidently. Chen raised an eyebrow. You're sure? No, Liang admitted. But I believe in it. Let's test it. The team set up a live test using real market data. The atmosphere was tense. Nobody spoke as they watched the program make its first set of trades. Liang held his breath as the screen updated. One trade succeeded. Then another, and another. Profits climbed steadily. An hour later, Chen let out a loud laugh, breaking the silence. It's working, he shouted, slapping Liang on the back. The team erupted into cheers, and for the first time in weeks, the weight on Liang's chest lifted. But the excitement was short-lived. They still needed to prove that the system could sustain its success over time. For the next 2 weeks, Liang barely slept. He monitored the program day and night, making small adjustments to improve its performance. There were setbacks, days when profits dipped and his anxiety returned, but each time he found a way to stabilize the system. Yanyu often visited him at the office, bringing food and reminding him to take breaks. You can't run on caffeine forever, she said one evening, placing a bowl of soup on his desk. Liang smiled weakly. I'll rest once we secure funding. Yanyu sighed but kissed him on the forehead. Just don't forget why you started this. Her words stayed with him. He wasn't just building a business for profit. He wanted to create technology that pushed boundaries. High Flyer was only the beginning. The big test came when their investors scheduled a meeting to review the program's progress. If they weren't impressed, the company would be finished. Liang dressed carefully that morning, putting on the only suit he owned. His hands trembled slightly as he tied his tie, but he took a deep breath and steadied himself. You've done everything you can, he told himself in the mirror. Now, show them what you've built. The meeting took place in a sleek conference room with floor-to-ceiling windows. The investors sat around a large table, their expressions serious. Chen presented the initial results, explaining how the algorithm had improved over time. Then it was Liang's turn. He connected his laptop to the projector and displayed live data from the stock market. The program began trading, and the investors watched closely. Liang's heart raced as he explained each step of the process. How the AI identified patterns, minimized risks, and maximized gains. Minutes passed, and the numbers on the screen kept climbing. One investor leaned forward, narrowing his eyes. "What's the projected return for this quarter?" he asked. Liang didn't hesitate. "If current trends continue, we're looking at a 15% profit increase." The investor nodded, impressed. As the presentation ended, the room filled with murmurs of approval. Liang exhaled, realizing he had been holding his breath. The lead investor stood up and extended his hand. "We'll fund your next phase," he said. "This is exactly the kind of innovation we're looking for." After the meeting, Liang and Chen stepped outside into the fresh air. The rain had stopped, and sunlight broke through the clouds, casting a golden glow over the city. "We did it," Chen said, grinning from ear to ear. "We saved the company." Liang smiled, feeling a mixture of relief and pride. "No," he corrected. "We built something worth saving." High Flyer had survived its first major challenge, but Liang knew there would be more obstacles ahead. Still, he had learned something valuable. Resilience wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about facing it head-on and finding solutions. Chapter 10. The Birth of DeepSeek. Liang Wenfeng sat in a crowded cafe, the noise of clinking cups and conversations blending into the background. Steam rose from his cup of tea as he stared out the window, deep in thought. The success of High Flyer had been a turning point, but something inside him still felt incomplete. Yes, they had built an AI system that could predict market trends. Yes, they had made profits. But was that enough? No. He thought about the farmers who struggled to predict harvests, the hospitals overwhelmed with patient data, and the scientists searching for patterns in complex research. AI could do more than trade stocks. It could change lives. His fingers tapped the table as an idea began to take shape. What if he built an AI company that went beyond finance, one that tackled problems in multiple industries? What if he created something that solved real-world challenges? Liang finished his tea, grabbed his notebook, and began sketching the first blueprint for what would soon become DeepSeek. A few weeks later, Liang stood in front of a whiteboard in his apartment, markers in hand, explaining his vision to Chun Yi and Yan Yu. The small living room was cluttered with charts, algorithms, and sketches. "We'll build AI models that can adapt to different fields," Liang said, his eyes glowing with excitement. "Healthcare, agriculture, transportation, we can create something scalable and impactful." Chen rubbed his chin. "It's ambitious, but where do we start?" "With a prototype," Liang replied. "We'll focus on a specific problem, maybe disease prediction or resource allocation. Once we prove it works, we'll attract investors." Yan Yu nodded, her confidence in Liang unwavering. "I believe in this," she said. "But you need a strong team. You can't do this alone." Liang smiled. "I know. That's why I'm asking you both to help me." Chen grinned. "Count me in." Yan Yu placed her hand on Liang's. "We're with you." And with that, DeepSeek was born. The early days were filled with challenges. Liang rented a tiny office on the edge of the city, a cramped space with peeling paint and flickering lights. Desks were old, and the internet connection was unreliable. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the work. Liang spent long hours coding, designing AI models, and refining algorithms. Chen focused on business development, reaching out to potential clients and partners. Yanyu managed operations, ensuring the team stayed on track. But the road wasn't smooth. Their first prototype, a system designed to predict crop yields, failed its initial tests. The algorithm couldn't handle the complexity of real-world data. Liang's frustration grew as he debugged the program night after night. His fingers ached from typing, and his eyes burned from lack of sleep. One evening, after another failed test, he slammed his laptop shut and buried his face in his hands. "Maybe this was a mistake," he whispered. Yanyu walked over, placing a warm hand on his shoulder. "It's not a mistake," she said softly. "You've faced setbacks before. You can overcome this." Liang looked up, her words slowly sinking in. He had overcome obstacles with High Flyer. He could do it again. He took a deep breath, opened his laptop, and returned to the code. After weeks of effort, the team finally had a breakthrough. Liang tweaked the algorithm to account for unexpected weather patterns and soil conditions. When they tested it again, the system accurately predicted crop yields for multiple regions. The room filled with cheers as the results appeared on the screen. Chen high-fived Liang. "We did it! Now let's find clients who need this technology." Their first client was a small agricultural firm that struggled with production losses. When the AI successfully helped the firm optimize its planting schedule, word spread quickly. Soon, DeepSeek attracted the attention of a large investor, Mr. Zhao, who was known for funding innovative tech startups. During their first meeting, Mr. Zhao leaned back in his chair, watching Liang's presentation closely. "I like what I see," he said. "If you can scale this technology, I'm prepared to invest a significant amount." Liang's heart raced. This was the opportunity they had been waiting for. With Mr. Zhao's investment, DeepSeek expanded. They hired new engineers, rented a larger office, and began working on projects in healthcare and logistics. Their progress was steady, but so were the challenges. Competitors began to take notice. Larger companies with more resources started developing similar AI systems. Articles appeared online questioning whether DeepSeek could survive the competition. Liang read every word, each criticism cutting deeper than the last. "Don't let it get to you," Yanyu said one night, finding him scrolling through negative articles. "They're just words." "But what if they're right?" Liang asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "They're not," she replied firmly. "You didn't come this far to let doubt win." Liang nodded, though the weight of pressure was hard to shake. Then disaster struck. Without warning, Mr. Zhao pulled out of the project, citing market instability. The sudden loss of funding sent shockwaves through the team. Morale dropped. Engineers whispered about finding other jobs. Chen looked more stressed each day. "We're running out of money," Chen said during a team meeting. "If we don't secure another investor soon, we'll have to shut down." Liang felt the walls closing in. He had put everything into DeepSeek, his time, his energy, his dreams. Was this how it would end? But as despair threatened to overwhelm him, he remembered the lessons he had learned at High Flyer. Resilience wasn't about avoiding failure, it was about facing it head on. "We're not giving up," Liang said, standing up. We've overcome setbacks before. We can do it again. He spent the next few days reaching out to contacts, scheduling meetings, and refining their pitch. He worked late into the night, reviewing every detail to make sure they presented the best version of DeepSeek. The turning point came during a meeting with a new investor, Miss Liu, who was known for supporting innovative startups. Liang explained how their AI models had evolved and how they could adapt to various industries. He showed her case studies of past successes and outlined their plans for growth. Miss Liu sat quietly for a moment, tapping her pen against the table. Then she smiled. I like your determination, she said. I'm willing to invest. Relief washed over Liang like a wave. They had secured the lifeline they needed. With the new funding, DeepSeek regained momentum. They completed major projects, secured contracts, and rebuilt the team's confidence. Liang stood in the center of their new spacious office, watching as his team worked with renewed energy. He knew the journey wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more setbacks, and more competitors. But this time, he was ready. As the sun set outside, casting a warm glow over the city, Liang smiled to himself. DeepSeek wasn't just a company. It was a vision brought to life. And the best was yet to come. Chapter 11. The Breaking Point. Liang Wenfeng sat alone in his office, the glow of his computer screen casting shadows on the walls. Outside, the city lights sparkled like stars, but Liang didn't notice them. His eyes were red from sleepless nights, his fingers stiff from typing, and his head pounding with the weight of unfinished work. The once exciting buzz of DeepSeek had faded into a dull, endless hum of meetings, deadlines, and expectations. The problem wasn't the work itself, it was the pressure. Investors wanted faster results. Clients demanded perfect solutions. His team looked to him for leadership, but lately Liang didn't feel like a leader. He felt like a man slowly sinking in quicksand. His phone buzzed on the desk. It was Yanyu. He stared at the screen, debating whether to answer. She had been calling him often, worried about his health, but he was too tired to talk. He let it ring until it stopped. The next morning, Liang dragged himself out of bed, his body aching as if he had run a marathon. His reflection in the mirror startled him. Dark circles framed his eyes, and his face looked thinner than usual. He splashed cold water on his face, hoping it would wake him up. But the exhaustion wasn't just physical. It was mental. In the office, things weren't any better. His team was frustrated. One of the AI models had failed during a client demonstration the day before, and tensions were high. We can't afford another mistake like this, Chen said, his tone sharp. The client wasn't happy. Liang nodded silently. He knew Chen was right, but the words stung. He had been trying to fix the problem for weeks, staying late, skipping meals, and ignoring his own health. But nothing seemed to work. As the meeting ended, Liang returned to his desk and buried his head in his hands. His mind raced between hope and despair. What if DeepSeek fails? What if everything I've built falls apart? The thought of failure haunted him, and no matter how hard he tried to push it away, it kept coming back. One night, Liang collapsed at his desk. His vision blurred, and his chest tightened. Panic gripped him as he struggled to breathe. He managed to call Yanyu before losing consciousness. When he woke up, he was in a hospital bed. The room was quiet except for the soft beeping of the heart monitor. Yanyu sat by his side, her eyes filled with tears. "You scared me," she said, squeezing his hand. "You need to take a break, Wenfeng. You can't keep doing this to yourself." Liang swallowed hard. His throat was dry, and guilt weighed heavily on him. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I thought I could handle it." "You're not a machine," Yan Yu said gently. "You've been carrying too much alone." Her words struck a chord. Liang realized she was right. For months he had tried to be everything: leader, programmer, problem solver, but he had forgotten to take care of himself. The doctor entered the room and explained that Liang had suffered from extreme exhaustion and dehydration. "You need rest," the doctor said firmly, "and time away from work." A few days later, Liang traveled back to his hometown of Zhanjiang. The familiar sights of the coastal town brought a wave of nostalgia. The streets were quieter than the bustling city he had left behind, and the salty ocean breeze reminded him of childhood afternoons spent near the shore. His parents greeted him warmly, their arms wrapping around him in a hug that felt like home. His mother's cooking filled the house with comforting aromas, and his father's gentle laughter eased the tension in Liang's chest. For the first time in months, he slept peacefully. One evening, Liang walked through the neighborhood where he had grown up. The streets were lined with small shops, their owners chatting with customers as the sun set in the distance. Children played games on the sidewalks, their laughter echoing through the air. He stopped in front of the house where he had fixed his first radio as a child. The memory made him smile. Back then, life was simpler. He had been driven by curiosity, not by deadlines or pressure. He remembered the excitement of discovery, the joy of solving problems just for the sake of learning. That night, as he sat by the window in his childhood bedroom, an idea struck him. What if I go back to basics? What if I simplify the way we approach AI development at DeepSeek? His team had been trying to solve too many problems at once. But what if they focused on one problem at a time, perfecting each solution before moving on to the next? He grabbed a notebook and began sketching out a new plan. Instead of creating complex all-in-one models, DeepSeek could develop smaller, specialized models that could be combined later. It would be like building blocks, simple on their own, but powerful when connected. Liang's hand moved quickly across the page, ideas flowing freely. For the first time in months, he felt that familiar spark of excitement, the same spark he had felt as a boy fixing broken gadgets. When he returned to the city, Liang called an emergency meeting with his team. The office was quiet as they gathered around the conference table, their faces filled with uncertainty. They had seen him at his lowest, and some of them wondered if he had the strength to lead them again. But when Liang spoke, his voice was steady. "I know things have been hard," he began, "and I know you've lost some faith in me. But I've spent the last few weeks thinking about what went wrong and how we can fix it." He walked to the whiteboard and outlined his new plan. He explained how the building block approach would simplify their workflow and reduce errors. "We don't need to solve everything at once," he said. "We need to solve one problem at a time and build from there." The room was silent for a moment, then Chen nodded. "I like it," he said. "It's practical." One by one, the team members voiced their support. Liang felt a surge of relief. He wasn't alone in this. They were ready to rebuild, together. The following weeks were a whirlwind of activity. The team worked on the first specialized model, a diagnostic AI for hospitals that could quickly identify high-risk patients. The simpler design allowed them to complete the project faster, with fewer errors. When they presented it to a hospital network, the feedback was overwhelmingly positive. DeepSeek's reputation began to recover, investors took notice, and new opportunities opened up. Liang's confidence grew, but this time, he didn't overwork himself. He delegated tasks, trusted his team, and made time for rest. One evening, as he left the office, Yanyu met him at the door. "You look better," she said, smiling. "I feel better," Liang replied. "Thanks for not giving up on me." She squeezed his hand. "I knew you'd find your way back." As they walked down the street, Liang looked up at the stars above. He knew there would be more challenges ahead, but now he was ready. The breaking point had taught him something valuable. Sometimes, to move forward, you have to pause, breathe, and remember why you started. And with that lesson in his heart, he was ready to lead DeepSeek into a brighter future. Chapter 12. A Legacy of Innovation. The auditorium was silent, except for the clicking of cameras and the soft shuffle of chairs. The spotlight shone brightly on the stage, casting a golden glow over Liang Wenfeng as he stood behind the podium. His heart raced, not with fear, but with excitement. Today, he wasn't just presenting a project. He was unveiling something that could change the world. On the large screen behind him, glowing letters spelled out the words, DeepSeek AI, Transforming Global Solutions. Liang adjusted the microphone, took a deep breath, and began. When I founded DeepSeek, I had one goal: to create technology that solves real problems. Today, I'm proud to share the breakthrough that has brought us here. The audience leaned forward, eager to hear more. The story of DeepSeek's success had not been easy. There had been failures, sleepless nights, and moments of doubt. But through it all, Liang and his team had persisted. Their newest model, called DeepPath, was the result of years of effort. It was an AI system designed to learn and adapt across industries, from predicting medical diagnoses to optimizing energy grids in cities. Unlike previous models, DeepPath could handle large-scale problems without breaking down under pressure. The testing phase had been intense. Hospitals used it to identify high-risk patients and reduce emergency room overcrowding. Farmers used it to improve crop yields and minimize waste. Governments analyzed traffic patterns to reduce congestion and cut emissions. Each test was a victory, but Liang hadn't truly believed in its success until the results came back consistent, proving the model's versatility. He clicked a button on the remote in his hand, and the screen displayed data from their most recent project, using DeepPath to help a drought-stricken region in South Asia. We were able to increase water distribution efficiency by 30%, Liang explained, his voice steady. That's the kind of impact we dreamed of when we started DeepSeek. In the audience, familiar faces watched proudly. Yanyu sat in the front row, her hands folded neatly in her lap, tears glistening in her eyes. She had been with Liang through every step, through the highs and lows, the doubts and triumphs. Chen sat next to her, giving Liang a subtle thumbs up. Liang continued, sharing success stories from different sectors. A factory in Europe had reduced its energy consumption by 15% using DeepPath. A major hospital network in Asia had decreased diagnostic errors by 20%. The numbers were impressive, but Liang knew it wasn't just about data, it was about people. When we help a hospital save time, we're helping doctors save lives, he said, pausing to let the weight of those words settle in the room. When we help farmers grow more crops, we're helping communities fight hunger. That's the legacy we want to build. But success had not come without challenges. Liang thought back to the moment when DeepSeek was on the verge of collapse, when they had lost their biggest investor and the team's morale had hit rock bottom. He remembered lying in a hospital bed recovering from burnout and wondering if he had the strength to continue. But the lessons he had learned during that difficult time had shaped the company's future. One of those lessons was trust. Liang had learned to trust his team, to delegate tasks, and to share the weight of responsibility. No great innovation, he realized, could be achieved alone. DeepSeek had thrived because it was built on collaboration, resilience, and the belief that failure was part of the journey. "Let me tell you a story," Liang said, his voice softer now, drawing the audience into a more personal moment. "There was a time when our models didn't work. Our funding was gone. People told me to give up." The room was completely silent. "But I didn't give up," he continued, "because I knew that failure wasn't the end. It was just a step on the path to success." After the presentation, applause filled the auditorium. The sound was thunderous, echoing through the large hall. Liang smiled, but his mind was already racing ahead. There was still more to do. DeepSeek's success wasn't the final chapter, it was just the beginning. Later that evening, as the team gathered for a celebratory dinner, Yanyu pulled Liang aside. "You did it," she said, her voice filled with pride. "No," Liang replied, shaking his head gently. "We did it." She smiled and squeezed his hand. "Where do we go from here?" Liang looked out the window at the city lights, thinking about all the possibilities. "There's always more to discover," he said. DeepSeek can expand into clean energy, education, and even space exploration. We're just scratching the surface. Chen walked over, raising a glass. "To the future of DeepSeek," he said, clinking glasses with Liang and Yanyu. "To the future," Liang echoed, feeling the weight of the moment. That night, Liang found himself walking through the quiet city streets. The cool air brushed against his face, and the distant hum of traffic filled the background. He passed by shops closing for the night, street vendors packing up their stalls, and couples strolling hand in hand. For the first time in a long time, he felt at peace. He thought about his journey, from the small town of Zhanjiang, where he had fixed radios as a child, to the bustling tech world where his innovations were now making headlines. Each step had been a challenge, but each step had also been a lesson. As he walked past a small electronics shop, he paused. In the window, an old radio sat on display, its metal frame rusted but intact. Liang smiled to himself, remembering the radio he had fixed when he was 7 years old. That moment had sparked his curiosity. Now, standing here, he realized that spark had never faded. It had only grown stronger. He whispered to himself, "This is just the beginning." A week later, news outlets around the world covered DeepSeek's success. Headlines read, "AI pioneer Liang Wenfeng leads global innovation, and DeepSeek's breakthrough AI changes the game." Liang received calls from leaders in multiple industries, each eager to collaborate. But despite the attention, Liang remained humble. In an interview, he was asked what advice he would give to young innovators. "Never be afraid of failure," he said simply. "Every setback is a lesson. Stay curious, stay determined, and trust the process." Years from now, when people would look back on DeepSeek's legacy, they would remember the breakthroughs, the lives improved, and the industries transformed. But for Liang Wenfeng, the legacy wasn't just about innovation. It was about resilience, teamwork, and the belief that even the smallest idea could grow into something world-changing. As the stars twinkled above, Liang smiled. The journey that had started with a broken radio had led him here. And somewhere out there, he knew, another young boy or girl was tinkering with wires and circuits, dreaming of the future they would build together.